Hello, dear listener. I am so glad you decided to tune in this week to spend some time with us today. We are sipping on Tequila Noons, which is maybe that drink already exists, but one of my own creation today with tequila, some pineapple banana juice that I got from Costco, and just a squeeze of lime in there. We are listening to some jungle ambiance, some bugs, birds, perhaps capuchin monkeys. And our consideration of the day is this. It is a quote by... Ooh, I need to learn how to pronounce this name, but it is... I'm going to try my very best. Thich Nhat Hanh?
Yep.
Really? I got it? All right, well, I'll pretend like I did. His quote is, "If you think that peace and happiness are somewhere else and you run after them, you will never arrive." If you think that peace and happiness are somewhere else and you run after them, you will never arrive. That reminds me of a class in college that I had where we talked about this thing called the hedonic treadmill, which is like if you pursue happiness by like purchasing things, you'll never you'll just become you'll just adjust to like that standard. Like it'll be really nice at first for maybe 2 months, and then there'll be some other new thing. You'll never get there.
Totally. It's like almost unreachable.
What do you think about when you hear that quote?
Well, I immediately thought about this dream that I had, that I was on a bus and couldn't find my stop. Couldn't figure out what my stop was. And I actually Googled today what dreams on a bus mean. And one of the things said that first they had this like ad that popped up that you had to access the site from, and it says if you want to like continue with the site, and it says, "Yes, I want to access. No thanks, my life is perfect." And I had to choose no thanks, my life is perfect. I screenshotted that. Anyway, so I said no thanks, my life is perfect, because my life is perfect. I'm just kidding. And basically, like, what it means is that you never you're conforming a lot of the time. Like, you conform to the world around you, and a different dream would be you driving the bus, where you're like the driver and you are like in control and like all of that. And large tangent, but basically just like constantly conforming to the world, and I guess in not feeling like you're driving that bus yourself and feeling that happiness to be there. So.
No, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
I am not too studied in dream psychology, mostly because I don't put a lot of stock in it.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because I feel like buses are like such an indication of working together, where it's like deciding that like we as a society can benefit from our need, like our shared need to travel.
Yeah.
And so like we can all pool our resources together to fund this kind of greater transit endeavor. And I guess maybe in a dream fashion, it's like I'm partaking in this thing that I'm paying my taxes toward, versus
I guarantee you I'm not thinking about that.
Well, okay. But I mean, that's where my head was going.
Sure.
So you were on the bus. What was that? Was that it?
I mean, I realized I didn't even answer the question. Let me get this out there. My brain is very beep boop bop.
A beep boop bop.
And whatever I'm thinking usually spurts out. But I don't know. I think that had to do with like me not really almost like seeking that happiness in other people. instead of being the driver of my own bus and like feeling like I don't need to search for that happiness and like confidence, I guess is another word.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That was a great consideration of the day. All right. Well, I want to introduce our dear listeners to kind of the vision of this podcast. My name is Alex. I will be your host. And we also have our lovely leading lady, Madeleine, here.
Hello.
The vision of this podcast is to take some time to open up and talk about a current event or a notable figure in great detail. Then have Madeleine provide her instant thoughts and reactions to the said person or event. Our intention is not to convince you, our dear listeners, to take a certain stance on a relevant topic, nor is it to shame or rebuke others for their beliefs. We intend to claim our existence in this world, to dig ourselves into reality, then provide our cognitive reactions, whether that be like, oh my gosh, that made me sad, an emotional reaction, or like, I'm sweating because that's making me anxious, or, you know, whatever. We're existing and we're reacting. So, I suppose I speak for myself, but we appreciate your willingness to walk beside us in this this journey and ask for grace in our perspectives. Madeleine, would you like to add anything before we dive into our main story?
Namaste.
Namaste! That's what I've been doing at the hospital instead of shaking people's hands. Hashtag coronavirus. Okay. Without further delay, let's dive into our main topic of the day. Maddie, how educated are you on abortion in America today?
Alex, you know my answer. I mean, I have my own, like, personal experiences and what I've seen other people's personal experiences as an outside viewer, those perspectives. However, I don't necessarily find myself engulfed in the topic very often.
It's a tough topic.
It is very tough. Yeah, I feel like anytime I see somebody, like, very strong about one opinion, I can never fully, like, understand that. I think I'm very, like...
Yeah,
how are you so strongly, like,
sure
of that?
Yeah. I feel like, for myself, my windows into this topic are always through personal stories, where it's
totally.
like, you know, I hear about this one story and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a valid perspective, because it's not simple. I want to teach you about kind of a general overview of like the history of abortion in America, kind of like how it has been handled, what events have happened, maybe some main figures of the story, but through the context of one of the most recent events that has happened. How do you feel about that?
Sounds great.
Sounds great. I mean, you're my captive audience.
Yeah,
so.
I'm stuck here. He's locked me in, folks.
I've locked you in. Okay, so there is a non-profit kind of charitable foundation called the Yellow Hammer Fund that's based in Alabama. And a couple weeks ago, the founder, Amanda Reyes, purchased the West Alabama Women's Center, which is one of the 3 abortion clinics in Alabama.
Hold on. So this Yellowhammer place
Yep.
has an owner or, like, person in charge.
The person who created the Yellow Hammer Fund is Amanda Reyes.
Gotcha. And she purchased an abortion clinic.
She did.
One of 3.
There's only 3 of them.
In what area? What
Alabama.
Region? Alabama.
The
Cool.
state of Alabama.
Great.
And their mission in this endeavor, like purchasing the clinic, is to ensure that the women of Alabama, especially those of low income, continue to have safe access to quality abortions. That was essentially the most recent thing that happened in this ongoing struggle. I think that's a good way to put it, a struggle. this is in a long line of, I guess, falling dominoes of, or maybe a pendulum is a better way to say it, where people are reacting to different things. A good place to start is Roe v. Wade, which was a U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1973. There was a woman who was unnamed. She went by the name Jane Roe. She wanted to have an abortion in Texas. And it was her third child. She didn't have the means to provide. She was denied an abortion by the state. And she took legal action that made its way all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow.
It was argued once, and then it was re-argued, and then 3 years after the initial argument, like bringing this case forward, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that under the U.S. Constitution, women will not be denied the right to an abortion under any circumstance, barring, extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
That the Constitution holds that a woman's right to decide whether she wants an abortion or not is her own. That her decision to terminate a pregnancy is her own. Of course, that the doctor is included in that decision. Kind of, they're the one who will have to perform the operation and will be providing their doctoral advice.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. And that largely divided the country. It created lots of grassroots movements and special interest groups on both sides. On one side, you had people who were enraged by this decision. People who decided that they were going to put their money, their resources toward supporting the repeal of this decision, because they felt that life starts at conception, or maybe life starts at the heartbeat.
Yeah.
There were different kind of benchmarks along the way, that different groups have kind of proposed that, okay, this is when life starts. Largely, it is faith-based, these pro-life groups. And then there are groups on the other side, which are these pro-choice sort of groups that want to ensure that women continue to have the ability to get an abortion if they want one. As it stands, America has the fewest abortion clinics in the last 30 years than we ever have. And especially when Trump took office, that's when states in the interior and the South started to make movement on their more pro-life agendas. So, for instance, I was living in Missouri for the last 3 years. And in 2019, many of these central states and southern states started to create legislation to put it through their own congresses and their own senates that would increase the sort of requirements in order to receive an abortion, that would make it more difficult for doctors to provide these services, that would make it more difficult for these clinics to receive funding from their state governments. And like the legislation is varied across the board. In Alabama, there was a heartbeat bill that was passed. In Missouri, there were bills passed about sort of taxpayer money going toward these different clinics. A lot of clinics had to shut down. In Missouri, there is one clinic that remains, and it is in St. Louis. So, for instance, if a woman in Kansas City wanted to have an abortion in her state, she would need to travel to St. Louis, which is 3 hours driving away. But she would need to wait about 3 days after her initial consultation with the doctor at the clinic in order to receive her abortion. I don't know about you. I work a daytime job. That would be difficult for me. I would need to set aside a week.
Totally.
Because I would need to travel to St. Louis. I would need to make sure that everything is squared away, as in I would need to have housing there for however many days that took. I would need to then have people to help me sort of recover from this event. It's very, I don't know, it's tough. It's a rough procedure.
Yeah.
Depending on, well, not depending. So, these legislators in the more central and southern states were emboldened by the Trump administration. As in, they knew that at the end of Obama's administration, that one of the U.S. Supreme Court seats was not going to be filled. It was going to be filled by this man named Merrick Garland, who is a very prominent lawyer. But senators in, on the Republican side, argued that this is unprecedented. You are in the last year of your presidency. Like, this is inappropriate for you to be sort of placing a new Supreme Court justice on the bench. And they argued that it should be the next president that gets to fill this seat, whether or not it was Democrat or Republican. However, they were banking on the fact that over the last 40 years, most of the time after a president finishes their 2 terms, it is a president of the opposite party that fills the seat.
Sure, people get tired of what they have and they're like, well, let's try this one.
Exactly. Where, you look back and it's like, okay, it oscillates from Democrat to Republican to Democrat to Republican. For whatever reason. So, the Republican senators were kind of banking on that idea, is that, okay, we will stall this process. And they did. So, what that left the Supreme Court as was there are these 2 seats that have now been filled by conservatives, rather than one being filled by a Democrat and one being filled by a conservative.
Wow.
Or, sorry, a liberal and a conservative.
Yeah.
And, the Supreme Court justices are not supposed to, really align with a political party. It's more supposed to be that they are honoring the Constitution as this, guiding principle. But oftentimes we can rely on certain justices to vote certain ways based on, their political spectrum, where they fall. Scalia tends to be a switch voter. He might kind of land on more of a conservative side, or more of a liberal side, depending on the topic or subject. But the 2 newest Supreme Court justices have been much more conservative. So, for instance, what was his name?
You can make up any name right now.
I could make up any name.
They would know. I would know.
Yes, Brett Kavanaugh. Thank you so much, audience. Maybe I've had a little too much of my tequila noon.
Or not enough.
Brett Kavanaugh was kind of designated as the next Supreme Court justice, and he is very conservative and outspoken on his pro-life beliefs. This matters because if a decision like Roe v. Wade is to be appealed, to be decided we're not going to go by that anymore, it needs to be the Supreme Court. A lower court judge could not override that decision because it has a sort of amended and said, this is what we're going by as a country. Which is why Roe v. Wade comes up so much when we're talking about this abortion topic, where, yes, it talks about a lot of women's rights, but Specifically, it has to do with a woman's right to decide when she wants to abort, or if she wants to abort her pregnancy.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you have a Supreme Court panel that is skewed toward the conservative side, it's more likely that if you get a lawsuit that goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, that it would be decided in a more conservative light.
Yeah.
That being said, Justice Kennedy, who was instated by George Bush, has said that, hey, the decisions made by previous Supreme Courts should stand. As in, I will not participate in changing legislation and judicial decisions that have already been made. So that does kind of provide some staying power, where it's like maybe we don't have as much conservative power or votes in the Supreme Court than we thought we did. But on the whole, now there is more conservative power in the Supreme Court than there was before. I want to pause here and see if you have any questions about where we're at.
Well, let me look at my notes.
You're taking notes?
I have to. It's the way my brain works. Let me see. What did I write down? That was a very good amount of information.
It was a lot.
It was a lot of information.
Yeah, and I have zero apologies.
Oh, don't. That's awesome that you're so educated in all of that. I just felt very, I don't want to use the word, very interested in the way that, I guess just asking myself this question, as you were talking about like Missouri and there only being one clinic there. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. And yeah. I wonder what like their sex education is like there too, like what types of ways that they like put emphasis on that. And yeah, it's almost like if they don't give more in that area, then it's just like setting people up for failure almost, who don't learn about condoms and
exactly.
ways to prevent this in the first place if they aren't in a place to be pregnant or have a baby. Yeah, I don't know. Am I allowed to say how that, like, if that makes me sad?
Does it make you sad?
Yeah, that makes me sad to think about that people would not have, like, I don't know. I'm just interested to learn more about that, but if people wouldn't have that same access. As, like, we live in San Diego, and I feel like it's a fairly liberal area. Maybe
it's one of the more conservative places in California, but yes,
sure.
It's fairly liberal.
Maybe it's just the people I surround myself with. I'm not disclosing any political things at all.
Who did you vote for?
No, I don't know. But yeah, just to think that there's, I assume, a lot of clinics here and a lot of places where you can go and get the help you need in that area. And maybe because it is a bigger city, they put more emphasis on sex education than like rural areas. I don't know. Those are just my initial thoughts.
Of course. Having not done research into the sex education in Missouri,
Sure.
I can't specifically speak to that question, but I do know that standards of education are decided by state governments.
Gotcha.
However, when it comes to sex education, that is determined by each school.
Yeah, because they have to decide what they want to be shared or not. Wow.
It can be decided by the district.
Wow.
And so, for instance, I know that in my own district of Poway, where I grew up, we were taught sex education twice. Where there was an initial one in 5th grade, and then there was a second one in 7th grade. Where the one in 5th grade is kind of like a, what is your body?
Okay.
And like, is this a penis? Is
Yeah.
this a vagina? Like, oh wow, I've never seen that before. And kind of essentially how life is created.
Sure.
That process
Yeah.
of sex, insemination, that sort of thing,
Yes.
pregnancy. That like, wow, these exist. But that was something that was like a parent signature required sort of presentation in fifth grade.
Like anatomy. which is
Exactly.
what the world. Yeah.
Right, and so it was literally like these three doctors, or maybe a doctor and two nurses, that showed up, and all of the fifth graders were packed into the library to learn about sex. Not in like how to do it,
Sure.
but just the process
This is
of it.
what it is, yeah.
Right, and that was what was decided by the district to be appropriate. Where in seventh grade you learn more in depth about the anatomy and kind of the process of going through puberty. Like, what does it look like for a male anatomy? What does it look like for a female anatomy? But I would honestly say that the most that I learned about sex and sex education was outside of school. Still,
Yeah.
like even in this liberal state of California, like I mostly learned about it from my mom and from my friends and from the internet,
Sure.
where it's certainly not perfected
Yeah.
at this point. So, kind of zooming back in on Missouri,
Yeah.
I would venture to say that it's even less informative than what we have here in California. I don't know,
Yeah.
but that's what I would venture to say, since it is a heavily conservative state. Tend to vote red. And yeah, that's what my gut is telling me.
Nice. That's really, yeah. Good.
Yeah, and like these, like that information is very important in how do I conduct myself as I'm growing up as a teenager. Like, teenagers have sex, and teenagers have babies.
Sure thing.
And if you don't know that a condom can help, or if you don't know that, whatever, or if you're unwilling to tell your parents, all of these different circumstances can lead to just bad situations.
Yeah.
One of those situations being, I have this pregnancy, like I am now bearing a child, and I don't want to be bearing this child.
Totally. Yeah, I can't imagine what that fear is like to have. I can imagine it, but yeah. It's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, we're lucky to have not gone. We're lucky to have not gone through that.
Yes.
We're lucky to have not gone through that. Did you have any other questions before I keep moving forward?
No questions.
Awesome. I just took another sip of my tequila noon.
I'm getting close to the end here.
Yo, I had
2 more sips.
Nice. If you want me to refill, we can certainly do that.
I'm good.
Okay, cool. So this is where the Yellowhammer Fund comes in. In 2019, there were a lot of different bills that passed around the time that I was leaving Missouri. These bills that were passing in these sort of central states and southern states that heavily restricted or imposed many sort of sanctions on what it looks like for a woman to pursue an abortion. Specifically in Alabama, there was a heartbeat bill that was passed that said if there is a detectable heartbeat, which happens around 6 weeks, an abortion cannot and will not take place, or else the doctor who performs that abortion will face 99 years in prison.
Wow. What was the week? The
6 weeks.
benchmark? 6 weeks.
So typically around 6 weeks is when the heartbeat
Yeah.
shows up.
When does a pregnancy test work? Should I know the answer to
That's
that
a good
one?
question. My gut is telling me that it works almost immediately, like within the first few weeks, maybe 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds more.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds about peeing on the stick. Stick says yes. Okay. So, I mean, like you think about someone who is, leading an active sex life. If there is an accident, maybe a tear in the condom, or, for, like, God forbid, like a rape that happens. The woman might not know that they are pregnant until much later when they start to show or when they miss
A menstrual cycle.
a period. A period. Right. Because that sort of indicates that something is off, something is different.
Sure.
You don't show your pregnancy until months later because it starts off the size of a few cells.
Yeah.
And then months and months pass before it's even detectable through your clothing. 6 weeks is very early in a pregnancy. When these bills passed, there was lots of uproar around the country. And people on the side of pro-choice kind of put their money where their mouth was. And they decided to support charitable foundations. One of those foundations being the Yellow Hammer Fund. Like I said before, their mission is to support women of low socioeconomic status, low income, in being able to get an abortion. And that is across the board. That means they are going to pay for their transportation to the clinic. That means that they're going to pay for the actual procedure. That means that they're going to pay for any medications, the whole thing. 2 years ago, they were only able to kind of put forth $330 a week or something like that toward their the people they were supporting, the women that they were supporting. This year, they're able to put forth $9,000 a week.
Wow.
Correct. Wow.
That's a lot more.
Because of the amount of donations that have been flooding in to support these women who are seeking abortions. This is a big deal because it almost shows this pendulum shift of legislators saying, we want to make it more difficult for women to get this procedure. And the people who support abortion saying, we are going to give our resources to make it more available.
Sure.
And that money wasn't coming in 2 years ago. Now it's coming in.
Interesting.
Right? And the amount of money that has come in has allowed this very small nonprofit to become a very large nonprofit and purchase one of the 3 clinics remaining in Alabama. Now, it's in western Alabama, which is a big deal. As I was saying about Missouri, the one remaining clinic is in St. Louis. If you don't know the geography, St. Louis is on the eastern side. So that clinic not only serves Missouri, it also serves Illinois.
Wow. How many clinics are in Illinois?
Chicago probably has quite a few.
Yeah.
But Illinois is a very large state. And so that rural interior and southern part of Illinois, the women there go to Missouri to be served in that way. Similarly, the women of Louisiana might go to this Alabama clinic to get the services that they require. And, of course, this clinic does not only do abortions. They also provide other sort of contraceptives and, health screenings and whatnot. But because of the strictness of the legislation, the way that government was cracking down on these clinics, it was harder and harder to keep their doors open and to provide the services that they want to provide. This direct from the people's pocket to this charity to this now clinic that is owned by this charity means that the people of America who support pro-choice are supporting women of low economic status to get abortions in Alabama, not the government. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal because right now the legal battles are taking place. Those decisions that were made at the state level will move up through the courts. And eventually they will find their way to perhaps the seats of the U.S. Supreme Court. But in the meantime, what it looks like is that the people who support pro-choice will need to support the women of the interior of the country who want an abortion because their governments won't. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, the Supreme Court is divided on this particular subject. Split down the middle, but toward the conservative side. It's not simple.
What do you mean when you say split down the middle, but towards the conservative side? If it's down the middle, wouldn't it be...
You're right. You're right. It is on the conservative side. A little over half. Which seems like, if you give it enough time, the projection is, okay, Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned.
How does that, work? How are people allowed to say, this is fine now, but then later on it's, changes? I don't know.
Yeah, that is the purpose of the judicial branch of the U.S. government is to interpret the intention of the Constitution. And they have different ways of determining. Sure.
And I can see how that's good in, certain scenarios to be able to, perspectives change, things change, everything's not going to be all the same all the time, but I don't know. Maybe I'm diving into too much of my opinion on it, but...
That's the point.
Yeah.
I want to hear your opinion on it. But I hear what you're saying is here is this Constitution, which is hundreds of years old now. Does it directly apply to its citizens who are still living under its direction? A lot of people would say yes to the word. A lot of people would say no. It served a culture that doesn't exist anymore.
Roe v. Wade is what you're talking about.
I'm talking about just in general. That the Constitution at large
Gotcha.
is a document that exists in history.
Yeah.
And so, it was written by people in the 1700s for people in the 1700s.
Totally.
Does it apply to us now? Some people would say yes. Some people would say yes, but. Some people would say no.
Totally.
Right. And I think that is a great contributing factor to this dispute.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it falls in the laps of the Supreme Court to make that decision. Not the president, not the legislative branch, which would be the Senate and the House.
Interesting.
Interesting is right.
Thank you for that knowledge.
You are welcome. I was going to, at this point, give projections from experts, it seems like it's going to end up this way, it seems like it's going to end up this way, but I was unable to find consensus on that topic, where perhaps the best thing I could glean from that research is nobody knows. Yeah. Where the one thing we do know is that we will continue to struggle.
Yeah.
The Yellowhammer Fund argues that legislation aimed at restricting access to abortion directly affects women. It's almost racist. That's their stance. Is that
racist?
It's racist, where it directly affects women who are women of color, women who are born in cultures that non-white, that it makes it more difficult for people who don't come from means. and that sort of perpetuates the problem.
Yeah. And then it's like a cycle of tons of other problems too. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
like
think
what?
about mental health, drug abuse, like so many, suicide. Like, I don't know, obviously thinking like the extremes of things, but like, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. That is the main story that I had to teach you today. And so I want to move into a time of finding your hot take on this subject. This is a time for you to ask questions, to react to the story, to, I don't know, just like be you and talk about it. What does this
Sure.
bring up for you?
Let me look at my notes.
Let me look at my notes.
Let me look at my notes. Well, one thing I did write down. Basically, it was when we were talking about sex education. I wrote down, we don't talk about sex enough.
We don't.
Very taboo. I think, especially in like faith-based communities too, that seems, I don't know, depends on I don't know what community you grew up in, but the ones that I've seen and experienced, they try, but not, it's still kind of shameful almost. Yeah, that's really sad. Yeah, we don't talk about sex enough, and that it's like almost like you're not dealing with the prevention of that. It's almost like allowing it to happen and then saying, and then you don't have a choice. It's like, we're not going to prepare you in the right steps to like deal with it, and then
Right.
like, not to say that it's on the government to teach everybody about sex, or like, I don't know, but you're higher people you look up to as a teen. You're looking up to people that will feed you knowledge and like help guide you and, I don't know, your own decisions. And like you said, teens are gonna have sex. Like, people have sex. It happens. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I wrote down was, this one's a bit more like, not to say the other one wasn't serious. When you add the word sex into things, it can make it a little silly. But this one's a bit more serious, I guess. Listen more. I don't know. I think that there's real power in listening to people's stories. And I can't speak like that this is truth, but in my head I perceive that possibly people that are very strongly opinionated in one stance possibly were taught that from somebody else in like their own experiences, and those people might have also been taught that, and like this is the way it is type thing. So I think there is a lot of weight and beauty in listening to other people's experiences, sitting down with somebody that has experienced an abortion, or that fear of not being prepared to have a kid. Like, oh man, imagine then you think about adoption, like that is always an option, and a beautiful option at that too. I think it's really beautiful, but it's also very sad too to give away your child. Very powerful, very like strong, but sad, and beauty can come from that. But I don't know, that makes me sad to think about a mom having to do that. But then you think about this is my brain now.
Love it.
But then you think about like the sadness of killing. Is that the right? Could you use that word? I don't know. That's
some would.
Yeah, it's like a harsh word. That how do you formulate words to describe an abortion? I guess.
How would you describe an abortion?
I don't.
Like, if I had to put you on the spot right now and say, like, define abortion. Like, what the process?
I won't do it justice, and I don't want to offend anybody that's been through this experience. Obviously, my perspective is I've never had an abortion myself, so I don't know. But
thank you for preparing me.
You're welcome. Sensitive soul. And I would say, terminate. Is that like? I feel like that's a terminate a pregnancy. Maybe I'm speaking from things I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
But that's hard because I don't know the answer. As we've pointed out, nobody really seems to, of when life begins. So the word killing kind of almost seems like you're killing, it's like murderous, like very morbid and like not pleasant to use that phrase. But same with terminate too. That doesn't seem like a pleasant word to me. Man, Alex, this is a woo. I am
You
dancing
are
my way through this. Just imagine me tap dancing.
No, I didn't give you an easy topic, and I want your opinion too.
Sure.
Like, and I know it.
Do I have an opinion?
I don't know. Perhaps
don't
not.
know.
You're right that the word terminate still has a finality to it, and that go away, fruit fly. That it's not an easy topic because death is not an easy topic.
Totally.
And I think that there's a modicum of death denial in our culture, where we are very removed from the death of our food. We're very removed from the death of our family members, where 100 years ago, when we were moving into a new topic, but 100 years ago, a death of a family member meant that your family member died in your house, and you would have to prepare the body, and you would bury the body, and you would take care of that process. But now it's largely this person dies in this hospital, or this person is carted away if they die in the home by the ambulance or something like that. And then all of the things that are funerary are taken care of by this funeral home over here. Like, that's their job. And so death is never experienced in our day-to-day life, which may contribute to our cult of youth that has sort of cropped up in this country. But, again, a topic for another day. Death is a very hard subject. And I think that, honestly, that's why so many people have difficulty with that existential dread. So, where that leaves us is faith and belief. Like, if you believe that life begins when an egg is inseminated by the sperm, like, that's when the soul enters this body, then there it is. That's life. Some people believe, no, it's the heartbeat. Some people believe, no, it's when you first breathe.
Yeah. But honestly, all of those opinions, like, it's your, like you're saying, it's your own belief. It's your own perspective. And I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine there are a lot of men making these decisions. Like,
we're taking up too much goddamn space.
Yeah, a lot of space to like take to decide for a woman, like that. Regardless of like where you stand on it, that seems off to me.
Okay.
That kind of goes back to my hot take.
Oh, wait. Do you, where's the hot take? Have you said the hot take already? Have we made it to the hot take? Dear listeners, we have made it to the hot take. Madeleine, take it away.
Step down, men.
Okay. Here's the hot take. Step down, men. Tell me more about this hot take. I think that it speaks for itself, but...
Sure. It goes back to what I was saying about listening. Like, listen. Sit down and listen to the people that are, like, directly affected by it. And that is a woman and her body. And, yeah.
Yes, I would venture to say that if you were faced, with this situation in your life, either currently or in the past, that you would have liked to be listened to.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Not that I've never experienced abortion myself, but I've witnessed like friends go through pregnancies that they didn't want at first, and have had the space to go to a Planned Parenthood, was the specific one, and talk to someone about that struggle, and then deciding to like go forward with the pregnancy. And I actually witnessed the birth of
Beautiful.
one baby, and it was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. And it was sad to think that child could have not been there. Like, that experience could never have happened. But I also think it was amazing that, like, this particular friend had, like, she had the choice to do that. She was able to get informed and go somewhere where they could teach her and tell her different things. And, I don't know.
Totally. I mean, the things that are coming up in my mind is, first and foremost, the prospect of raising a child drastically alters the course of your life.
Totally.
Where a child deserves attention. They deserve being taken care of. And the person that's going to give that care is the parent. And so if you are getting pregnant and you are being required to see it through, there is a responsibility that falls on your shoulders.
Totally.
To care for this human being. And if one is not ready, actually, taking a step back, when you are presented with that reality, that's a big jolt.
Totally. Yeah.
And so, I imagine that many would not be ready for that if they were not anticipating it.
Yeah, and putting myself in those shoes, like, to be in a place of, like, oh, shiz, like...
Thank you for, not cussing
PG.
there.
Like, to not have an option.
Sure.
Or a choice. I do, however, understand that, like, we mentioned it, adoption. Like, I do understand that. And, like, I think that's where I become a little bit on the fence of,
sure.
Like, what do I believe in? I believe in... I don't know. But I do see power in, like, making your own choice, being able to be heard, men not making a decision for you, but also the beauty of a child and, like, that living thing inside of you. Like,
of course.
I mean... Yeah, I can totally see the weight of that, and it's hard to say when a life begins, but I don't know.
I think you do know. You gave your hot take.
Yeah, I did.
You did.
I did.
You
I
did.
mean, politically, I feel like I know where I stand.
Yeah.
More of just the whole topic itself.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you care about the ability to make the choice.
Totally.
Where you respect a woman who wants to see this pregnancy through, even if it's unexpected.
Sure.
And you also respect a woman who says, I don't want to see this pregnancy through.
Sure.
And that if she is not given the room to speak or to make her own decision, then something is wrong there.
Totally. I do, however, think that they're, like... I don't want to come across as saying, like, have an abortion whenever the heck you want. Like, I do think that there needs to be, like, preventative steps to, like, educate people in what that is, what that can look like the actual physical, like, what I've read and heard about what an abortion is, like, how painful that is, and, like, the emotional turmoil, like...
Right.
Yeah, and that I think that just comes down to more of, like, education and, like, preparing somebody for the repercussions that could bring.
Right.
And, yeah, I don't remember where I was going with that, but...
I feel like you summed it up well.
Sure.
Hot take. Step aside, men.
Step down.
Step down, men. Great. We're going to move into a time called rapid fire, where I'm going to say a sentence summing up a current event, or I don't know if you're going to have time to write down notes on this, because I'm expecting an answer immediately after I say it. Okay. Madeleine is going to give her instant hot take on these quick stories, which are not necessarily simple, but ones that I found relevant to talk about. And yeah, that's about it. I think that speaks for itself.
Sure.
Great. All right, first story. The fictional economy of the popular cartoon game Animal Crossing has captured the attention of real-life economists who have begun tracking the fluctuation of turnip pricing and interest rates set by a character in the game called Tom Nook. What's the hot take?
LOL. Wow. What is so important about turnips?
I don't know.
That's it. That's all I got.
Oh, hot take. What's so important about turnips? Thank you. All right. The next subject. While the public shaming and ostracism of American celebrities caught with illegal substances has largely shifted toward compassion and awareness in America.
So, you're basically saying, reread that.
I will reread it. While the public shaming and ostracism of American celebrities caught with illegal substances has largely shifted toward compassion and awareness of mental illness and addiction,
Sure.
Japanese celebrities have been found to participate in a dark underground of drug culture to avoid being caught, because they not only face stringent laws governing possession and consumption, but also face a greater and more thorough condemnation and exile by their culture at large. What's the hot take?
That's a lot of big words, Alex. Okay, so basically you're saying that Japanese celebrities have a more like underground drug dealing, drug scene than American celebrities? Were you comparing it to American celebrities?
I was.
Who have more compassion and like awareness of mental health and like...
Yeah, like, Robert Downey Jr. has
Sure.
continued to become an amazing, successful actor.
Sure.
Despite his teen struggles with drugs. Whereas in Japan, this is the rapid fire.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be explaining it. I know,
need.
okay. But that's the idea. That Japanese celebrities, when they get caught, they're done. Their career is done.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's redemption?
Hot take. What's redemption? Is that what it was?
Why not redemption?
Okay, hot take, why not redemption? Thank you. Here's the next story. A molecule called erdafitinib, but going by the drug name Balversa, was found
so
to
much
be...
easier.
I know. Balversa was found to be 32.2% effective in treatment of kidney and urinary cancers and was approved by the FDA in April of 2019.
Alex, where do you find these? 1, 2, why was that founded in 2019? That seems like a very, 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 very long time to help cure kidney and urinary infections. There must be lots of people that deal with that struggle. That
You're
was
right.
A very long hot take.
So, sorry, if you could sum up your hot take there.
Pick up the pace.
Hey, scientists, here's a hot take. Pick up the fucking pace. All right, next story. Due to the continued conservation efforts in New Zealand, the kiwi bird, which is the smallest member of the ratite family, was removed from the endangered species list in 2017.
Yay, kiwi bird.
Hot take, yay, kiwi bird. This is our last rapid fire. Over the last 10 years, the top 20 list has featured singers and songwriters of younger and younger ages, including the then 15-year-old Billie Eilish.
Yeah, she's great. I love Billie Eilish.
Hot take.
Can that be my hot take?
Yes, it can. Hot take, I love Billie Eilish.
Let the kids do what they want, but educate them.
No, I'm going to stop you right there. Hashtag hot take, let the kids do what they want. All right. We have certainly reached our time limit here. So I want to sum up our time here. We discovered that men need to step down. That is the hottest of hot takes
Sure,
that I
totally.
think we discovered today.
Yeah.
That being said, dear listener, we encourage you to love yourself well this week. You deserve all the love and joy and respect that you desire, just because you are you. Join us next week, where we will be sipping on a mimosa of some variety, and we'll be listening to the mating noises of bats, and giving our freshest, hottest takes about something completely new. Goodbye for now.
Thank you very much.